Greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracal here. Tonight I'm joined by a very interesting guest, Jarrod Delport from COPE. Now I'm going to hand the mic over to him. Jarrod, tell us a bit why the audience should care who you are, and stay tuned.
Well, Conscious Caracal, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm a big fan and I really appreciate the invite. Thank you very much. My name is Jarrod Delport. I'm 26 years old. I'm running for Parliament under the Congress of the People. And people really need to get to know who I am because they need to get to know who the Congress of the People is as a political party. And we'll get into that a little bit later, the details of COPE. And I'm really here. I'm here tonight to chat to you and to talk about the policies that are going to offer South Africa a fresh start.
Right, yeah, I saw you were using that hashtag, fresh start. We can get into that a bit later. But now, firstly, for the people that might be curious, can you just give us an idea of what the background of COPE is? Where did you guys come from and how did you end up where you are now currently?
Well, COPE has been around for just over a decade now. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year in December. We were formed in 2008, actually, as a breakaway from the ANC. When Jacob Zuma was elected in Polokwane in 2007, President Mosiuoa Lekota, who currently heads up the Congress of the People, met with some like-minded individuals who just couldn't allow our country to be led by the likes of Jacob Zuma. And so the core foundations of the Congress of the People were set in place. We're a social democratic constitutionalist party. We believe first and foremost in the Constitution of the Republic. That's a very important facet of our founding principles. And in 2009, we won 7.3% of the vote and 36 seats in Parliament. In 2014, unfortunately, our vote share dropped quite significantly, and we now sit with 3 members of Parliament, Mosiuoa Lekota, Willie Madisha, and Deirdre Carter. And we are now on the mend. We've learned from our past mistakes. We've rooted out corruption in our party. We've rooted out any forces that were against us in our party. And not only are we offering South Africa a fresh start, but COPE has had its own fresh start. We've had our Damascus moment, and we are coming back. We are on the path to the union buildings.
Right. Well, thank you again for coming on and sharing some of that very insightful information with us. And I just saw here in the chat, Brett says, has your guest seen the documentary Disrupted Land? His party leader, MP Lakota, did a great job in that film. No, thank you, Brett.
Thank you. It was a great piece of documentary filmwork.
So to move on, just a bit of personal background. How did you get involved in COPE?
Sure. You know, it's actually a very interesting story. I was 16 years old, about to turn 17 in the last election in 2009, or 2 elections before that. And I was really interested in COPE. I was fascinated by Mosiuoa Lekota. And I actually gave his office a call back in 2009, and we spoke for a little bit. And he said, you know, come on board, let's talk about the future of this country. And I went to a few COPE rallies, and unfortunately, I wasn't of the age to vote back in 2009. And then I went to university. I studied politics, philosophy, and education at Wits University. And I noticed that our country was on the path to calamity, especially under the previous presidency, under Shilowa. And I noticed that things were not going in the direction that we should have been heading in as a constitutional democracy. So in late 2018, not late 2018, in about June 2018, I actually contacted President Lakota personally via Twitter. And I said to him, Mr. President, we've got to figure out a way forward. And he responded to me. He gave me his personal cell phone number. And I've been a dedicated and loyal member of the party since then. And here I am, running for a seat in the National Assembly.
Right. No, man, it's interesting to see again the little things that make a difference. The idea of just some regular citizen taking a step and rolling up his sleeves and doing something. And I have a lot of respect for that type of initiative. I see Ronaldo Goses in the chat. He says, I have the utmost respect for Siyasanga Sajadu, who is a councillor for COPE in the Nelson Mandela Bay district. Now, I don't know if you know who that is, Jarrod.
Of course, Comrade Siyasanga. She was a councillor in Nelson Mandela Bay. She is an absolutely phenomenal politician. The future of not only our party, but of South Africa. And she really grilled the EFF in an expropriation without compensation debate. I urge all of you to give that video a watch or give it a listen. It's on our page, Cope South Africa on Facebook and Cope SA on Twitter. So shout out to Comrade Siyasanga. We'll see you hopefully in Parliament very soon.
Right. So seeing as COPE is an offshoot of the ANC, or like is a breakaway from the ANC, can you tell us a bit more in terms of what sets you apart, not only from the ANC, but also the other parties in this very, very crowded election that we are facing up in just 2 weeks? What makes your party unique, and what would you use to lure people towards your side?
Well, the three main tenets of the Congress of the People, and especially going into this election, the first one is putting the Constitution first. We believe in the negotiable settlement of 1994 and the process that involved multiple parties that culminated in the Constitution during the CODESA processes. And so we believe in constitutionalism. There's nothing wrong with the Constitution. There's nothing wrong with South Africa that can't be fixed via constitutional elaborations and using the Constitution to the benefit of the people. It doesn't need to be amended in any shape or form to benefit one or two or a group of individuals. It's set out in principle to benefit all of us. So that's the most important thing, is our Constitution. Second of all, we believe in equality before the law. We reject the idea of affirmative action and broad-based black economic empowerment, because we believe in each and every South African's given right of equality. There's a wonderful quote that equality, the promise of equality, is our birthright. And the Congress of the People believes that we are all equal before the supreme foundations of our constitutional republic. And also, most importantly, and this is one of my, one of the reasons I joined the Congress of the People, is because we believe in constitutional reform in terms of our electoral act. We believe in a participatory democracy, a direct democracy, where the voters of South Africa elect their members of parliament, their premiers, their MPLs. It's not enough to just elect your councillor every 5 years on a local municipal election. You've got to do it nationally. And with that, you will then have the people controlling the politicians, as opposed to the politicians controlling the people. So yes, we are an offshoot of the ANC, and I know we share similar colors, the wonderful yellow color of the ANC and COPE, but we are nothing like the ANC. We believe in putting South Africa first, as opposed to the ANC putting the party before the people.
Right. So I heard you there. You said you are not in favor of policies like BEE. So could you just give me an idea of where do you stand on, for example, BEE and also EWC?
Well, two very important issues going into this election, as EWC and BEE and affirmative action have really taken hold in terms of our discussions politically going into this election. But we believe in equal opportunity. We believe in community. We believe in economic empowerment through community-based efforts. We believe that South Africa can benefit greatly from having equal opportunities before the business and economic spheres of our country. To place a few, the elite, before the majority, that simply goes against our founding document. And affirmative action and BEE have really taken the wealth from a few and just transferred it to the wealth of a few new individuals. We can't have that. Nothing has changed for the majority of South Africans under BEE and under affirmative action. So we are offering local community economic empowerment programs that will benefit not only the few, but all South Africans. And to answer your question about EWC, the Congress of the People is utterly committed to ensuring that expropriation without compensation does not take place in South Africa. It is unconstitutional in our view, and we simply will not allow the ANC to use EWC as an emotive issue in this election. Why did the ANC promote willing buyer, willing seller for so many years, and then suddenly change its tune a few years going into the Zuma presidency? Because they knew they were losing support. It's populist rhetoric. It's not feasible. There's no factor taken into account, or there's no facts taken into account when it comes to EWC. Emotions are put before. It's simply not viable for our country. And President Lekota, as well as our dedicated members of parliament and members of provincial legislature will continue to vote against EWC as we have in the past. It is not something that we want for South Africa. It will lead to a complete collapse in our agricultural sector, and it will, the eyes of the world and the international community will not favor our country economically. It is a road to ruin. We need only look at the policies of Zimbabwe and Venezuela, where private property was expropriated without compensation, and that has led to economic ruin. Private property is a constitutional right, and we will not bend before any tenants or martyrs who so claim to support EWC. We will. It is not feasible, and that is why we are so against this horrendous policy.
I think a quote that actually really nicely sums up what you've been saying is the idea of that equality of opportunity is freedom, but equality of outcome is authoritarianism.
100%.
So basically, you can only achieve equality of outcome through coercion. But if you give the people equality of opportunity, they can live up to their own potential, each as an individual and as a country as a whole. Now, something interesting, I see the questions in the chat already flowing in. Thank you very much, guys. Keep posting those. I'll definitely get to them when the time is right. Another question that I have here that I just want to get your opinion on first is, while we are on this topic of policies, how do you, as COPE, plan to solve the energy crisis that we currently are in, specifically in regards to Eskom?
Well, we've got a video that's coming out this week about particularly our policies towards Eskom. First of all, Eskom is too big, and the way that Eskom has grown over the years has allowed for mass corruption. It has been looted. Our state-owned enterprises have been, quite honestly, bankrupted to benefit a few, the elite in the political circles. So what we will do as the Congress of the People is we will unbundle Eskom. We will absolutely looking at, we are currently looking, and we will absolutely look at ways of privatizing Eskom. We will offer up Eskom to the public, not only as a state-owned enterprise. We've seen how the ANC economic and fiscal policies have failed us towards our energy sector. COPE is also a big believer in bringing renewable energy resources. We can't rely on coal power alone. So we are insisting that, you know, our country could benefit from wind and solar. But the question of Eskom, it is a behemoth that has been allowed to grow at exponential rates every single year, and the numbers just double and triple every time you check. We simply cannot afford to keep Eskom as it currently is. So the Congress of the People, we will ensure that Eskom is dealt with. It is a top priority for us, and we've got to make sure that our economy keeps on running smoothly with the electricity on, with the power generation, with the power generating for economic feasibility in our country. So if you check out our website, we have a whole section dedicated just to Eskom. You can check out on our website, saconstitution.co.za, and then go down to our energy policies. But like we said, and as President Lekota has reiterated time and time again, it's simply too big. And it has become a complete burden on the South African taxpayers, who are already taxed to death, and who fund the lifestyles of the politically connected in this country.
Now, something I found very interesting earlier, while we're still on the topic of policy, I saw a tweet or a poll on Twitter that was asking, how influential is policies towards crime? How influential is that on your vote? And the overwhelming majority of responses to that was very influential.
Yeah.
So I have a two-part question. The first one you can answer, and then we can move on to the second part. The first question is, how is COPE planning to cope with the current incredibly high and unacceptable levels of crime we see at all levels of society? Well,
first off, crime has really gone, it's been swept under the carpet in the past few months in this run-up to the election. And it seems that we're focusing on issues other than crime. But COPE puts the security of South Africans at the forefront. It is absolutely imperative that safety and security is put back into the hands of the people. Our police force, for example, is far too politicized. We have now a police force that is political as opposed to apolitical, any other functioning democracy. And President Lekota has spoken to so many individuals out there who have said that safety is a main, top, sincere concern of theirs. So the party really wants to ensure that the police force is fixed. We need to seriously look at who is entering the police force, why certain police are charged with corruption and it's never followed through. We've seen very minimal amounts of jail time in terms of corrupt policemen. So that's our first priority, sorting out the South African police services. And then we'll move to the broader spectrum. Safety and security should not only be an issue that is dominated by the national executive. Safety and security differs from community to community, rural, urban, provincial, etc. So we want to sit and talk. We would establish task force and task teams that would sit with individuals at a local basis, on a local basis, and discuss what issues of safety and security are concerning them. Because you can't have a blanket policy of safety and security across the country. It simply doesn't work like that. It needs to be decentralized. And that's what we'll aim to do. And see what the communities are asking for, see what the communities are concerned most about, and address those issues in time.
And while you're on that notion of unique solutions to unique problems, is COPE in favor of, for example, making farm murders a priority crime like we see with gang violence? I think this is a question that a lot of my audience are very concerned about.
Sure. Look, farm murders are a massive concern for us. I saw some statistics that over the Easter weekend, there were 13 or 14 horrendous farm attacks. South Africa is a violent country. It's a country that has tremendously shocking violent crime that occurs across the board. And our farming community shouldn't be exempt. We shouldn't be ignoring our farmers who are crying out for assistance at this time. We should ensure that locally those farmers are looked after via a specialized police force that will go out into these areas where the farmers are, and to put their safety as a priority for their community. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Every single community has different issues facing them and that they want to be addressed. And you can't brush aside farm murders and farm attacks and these absolutely horrendous events that are taking place. But again, we've got to look at it from a local perspective. Why are those events transpiring? What are the motives behind these things? Is it violence? Is it acts of theft? And actively pursue these individuals who are to be found guilty of these treacherous and horrendous crimes. They must be brought to order. So many murders are happening in this country, particularly in the rural areas where these farms are located, where nothing is being done. Police dockets are going missing, and this is completely unacceptable. We cannot afford for this to happen in our country. As President Lekota has said, and I will reiterate again, the farming community in South Africa, whether they are black or white, they form the backbone of our agricultural community, and we cannot afford for their safety to be jeopardized in any shape or form.
Yeah, and I think just from my own personal experience, I think a lot of people that are still curious about COPE's policies regarding rural security and EWC can go look at what President Lekota said in the Disrupted Land documentary, which you can find on YouTube. I think you'll get a lot more insight, a lot more than we can all unpack now in this very short interview.
For sure.
Now, on the idea of local security and the idea of communities being assisted to be able to protect themselves, and I've seen this. There was a question I already would have asked, but I see it already in the chat as well. What is COPE's stance on gun control and firearms?
So the Congress of the People doesn't have a definitive policy over gun control and firearms. We believe that it is the individual's right to decide whether or not they would like to own a firearm. From a personal capacity, I support individuals who would like to own a firearm. I think there needs to be checks and balances in place. I think one shouldn't just easily be able to gain access to a firearm. But COPE believes that it should be left up to the individual. We don't want the government to control who decides and who is allowed. Excuse me. We don't want the government to decide who is and who isn't allowed to own a firearm. That we've seen how that doesn't work currently in our system. And with the complete lack of assistance from the police services in this country, people do feel under jeopardy and they feel that their safety and security is under threat. So why shouldn't we then allow for individuals who have had these tests put in place to own a firearm? It shouldn't be an issue in 2019 over individual choice. And that's what COPE is a firm supporter of, is constitutionalism and putting the ideas of democracy and access to democracy back in the hands of the people. Again, this is not an endorsement of gun rights. It's simply saying that we leave it up to the individual citizen to decide whether or not they would like to have access to a firearm.
Right. And here's the big question, something that I've seen a lot in run-up to this interview, but also in terms of just something I've personally seen a lot regarding your party specifically, is the idea of, and you definitely are familiar with it, a wasted vote. A vote for a smaller party is basically a wasted vote because it's not going to achieve anything. It's not going to give that party a seat. It's going to actually hurt the real official opposition, not naming any names. What are your thoughts on that idea, specifically the concept of a wasted vote? Someone voting for a party that they think represents them, but that vote not really having any consequence.
Well, not without naming any names, a certain opposition party that currently exists was once one of the smallest political parties in South Africa in 1994, during the advent of our democratic dispensation. And they quite literally grew by eating into the support base of other opposition parties. Now, you see, the Congress of the People isn't really concerned about eating into opposition party votes. We are standing by our principles. We are standing by the ideas that we believe in. But more importantly, there is no such thing as a wasted vote. And I want to reiterate that to every single person who's listening tonight. No South African voter will waste your vote by voting for a party other than the ANC, DA, and EFF. We've created this, or so many politicians have created this horrific hegemonic identity or theory that a vote for a party other than the three aforementioned parties is a wasted vote. Firstly, it's not. It's your constitutional right, and it was a right that was guaranteed to you under our Constitution of 1996. You should vote for a party that you best believe will suit your interests as a person, that will best suit the interests of the party and of the people of this country. And if we would only vote for one or two parties, we'd be deadlocked in a horrible two-party system, which disallows any other dissenting voices against the two main factional parties. So that's nonsense. A vote for any party is a vote for participation in democracy. The more people that vote for differing parties, that opens up the dialogue. It opens up discussion about the future of the country. And there's not a single voice, and this is what COPE really wants to ensure that all of our listeners understand, is there's not one single South African voice. There are 60-odd million voices that need to be heard. And these elections are why we fought so hard, and why those who gave up so much for our democracy, so that we could be part of something bigger than ourselves, and that each and every one of us who are registered to vote can have a say in the way our country is run. It's absolute nonsense. I've never heard something so bizarre as an opposition party claiming that a vote is a waste. I mean, then how?
And the thing that I just from a practical perspective and seeing how this has happened in other countries. When you argue that only voting for the 2 or 3 main parties in your country is a meaningful vote, then you get into that situation that people moan and complain so much about, the idea of, now I have to choose between the lesser of 2 evils.
Exactly.
And the less diversity there is in your democracy to choose from, the more you are boxed into that position where you are forced to either abstain or to vote for one of the lesser of 2 evils. Now, if you are, for example, in a position where both you're in a country where there are 2 communist parties, one radical communist and one light communist party, I'm not going to vote for either. I'd rather spoil my ballot than vote, for example, for a communist party.
Sounds like
but at the same time, that is the end. That is where you're going if you don't have a diverse amount of parties to choose from. I would rather vote for a party that represents my values, as was intended by the people that thought up the idea of democracy, than voting for the most pragmatic party and being forced to vote for the lesser of 2 evils, because I refuse to vote for evil. Simple as that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's actually a slap in the face of our democratic values and democratic dispensation to say that a vote is a waste. Because essentially it's saying you don't know how to vote, so the only people that you can vote for are us as a political party, because we don't trust you to elect someone that your heart and mind would otherwise support. No, it's absolute nonsense, and you're correct. If we allow that, then we are dooming ourselves to a two-party system. And look, the 2014 to 2019 National Assembly had 13 political parties. And sure, we might not necessarily agree with each and every one of them. It's nearly impossible to do that. But if the dialogue is open and 13 political parties, all with separate ideologies and ideas, are participating in our democratic institutions, then my goodness, then we're doing something right as South Africans.
I see here in the chat, Claude asks, what does Cope think of the ZACP wanting to give people 50k shares of SOEs and taking away SIE management from the government?
Look, the Cope's policies are quite different to the ZACP's policies. We do like the idea of offering up our state-owned enterprises to the public. We think it's a wonderful, that is exactly what they are. They are state-owned enterprises that should ideally belong to the people. I don't necessarily think the ZACP's policies in that regard would benefit South Africa. I don't think that it's a logistically, worthwhile policy. It's an interesting idea. It would be interesting to see it in practice. It's not Cope's policies. But I also think that if we're going to offer up the SOEs into public, or at least into individual ownership, we need to do it in a practical way that will not necessarily, it needs to be a long-term investment for the benefit of the public.
Right. And I see in the chat, Robin Kabanak is here as well. He says, I spoke to Mr. Lekota on the Renegade Report a few months ago. He seemed to believe in the concept of the capable state theory, espoused by Helen Zille. Does Cope have an official position on that?
Well, if you want to hear Mr. Lekota's exact response to that, I'll definitely get him on the show. I'm sure he'd love to discuss the responsible state, or at least the idea of the state opening up to the people. But the thing is that we as Cope, and it's also a personal belief of mine, is that we don't want more government. We want less government. Government has become so incredibly intrusive in our private and in our public lives. We don't think that the state should be entertaining and dictating what we should and shouldn't be doing as private citizens. But I do think that the state is an entity for good. I think it can be used for good. And I was actually sharing this today. And let me just read it to you just for a second here. Let me just find it. Just to get back to you, Roman, congratulations on the formation of the ZACP. It's a really fantastic initiative, and we wish you all the best. But just going back to one policy that I do want to discuss, and going back to the state itself, and it's an interesting idea, and it's one of the main reasons I joined Cope, is this the idea of a united destiny. I'm just trying to find it here. And it goes back to
while you're looking for that, just I saw a tweet the other day that basically sums up exactly what you were saying there, where the person says, so something very bad happens somewhere in the universe, and then the government's the government's reaction will always be, yeah, we're going to need some more authority and cash to solve that problem.
Exactly, 100%. Sorry about that. I found this wonderful quote, and I'd like to share it with you and your listeners for a second. And this is the very first thing that you read when you open up our manifesto, is the principle of shared destiny. It goes back to what we're discussing now about our country. We, fellow South Africans, are a group of diverse people inhabiting this beautiful country. The various paths we trod in our history have brought us to where we are and where we are going. We interact with one another in many ways in our daily lives, and we therefore have an effect on each other and on one another. There is no escaping the fact that we share a common destiny, the shaping of which, for good or for ill, is our joint responsibility. And that is our principle of shared destiny, our principle of shared responsibility. And sorry, it took me a while to find that. I'm a little bit on the blind side without my glasses, but it's fascinating. And going back to this idea that we're actually in this together. We shouldn't be looking at one party or one individual. It's not about you or about me. It's actually about us. And that's the driving force. That's why I'm running for parliament under the Congress of the People, because they're the only political party in this country that truly and utterly believes in putting the people first and having the idea that we're in this together. we've got ourselves into a really, or not we haven't got ourselves. The ANC has gotten us into.
Yeah, speak for yourself, man.
No, look, the ANC's gotten us into this. If there's one thing we can all agree on, is the ANC is stuffed up royally. So now we've got to figure out a way of how do we get ourselves out of this mess, and the only way we can do that is together. So, yeah, the idea of a
And something to get back to a previous point, the idea of the wasted vote and the small party's role. I think something that's going to be very important in this coming election is definitely going to be the power of coalitions. So that leads me to my question: if COPE were to form a coalition with any of the existing parties, do you see any parties that has potential in terms of value overlap, policy overlap, that would facilitate such a coalition?
That's very interesting because I think coalitions are the way of the future in this country. I don't think we'll ever have a one dominant party ever again in power after this election. I think going into 2019 towards 2024, we have a wonderful opportunity for diverse voices to stand up in coalition governments. To answer that question, at the moment, COPE will only work with parties and coalitions that put the Constitution first. And currently, there are no other parties at any level that we can, work with because they don't necessarily put the Constitution of the Republic first. It'll be interesting to see what happens after this 2019 election, which new parties are included in our parliaments and in our provincial legislatures. We are talking to people from different parties, not looking for coalitions, but just discussing, how can we benefit the country? Which policies and which ideas do we share that can bring lasting and credible and real change that benefits the people of this country. But for now, my friend, the answer to the question of coalitions, none, because COPE is going to win this election, and there won't be a need for a coalition government.
Especially in South Africa, in our context, I have a lot of admiration for positivity. It's very easy to be a cynic in our country. Now, that's why when I encounter someone that's genuinely positive and it's not just a facade, it's very refreshing. And especially someone that says that talks about the primacy of property rights, but specifically that bases that on the fact of it being grounded in our Constitution. I mean, that is a very refreshing take and something that I enjoy hearing from a party in our country.
Well, that's great.
I see here Brett asks in the chat, or he says rather, COPE needs to go into a coalition with the DA, IFP, and ACDP. Now, I want to take that remark and just change it a little bit. I think the IFP is going to be a very big player in KwaZulu-Natal come this election. I think seeing as how the ANC's makeup is at the moment, I think the IFP have a lot of room to grow and actually have an impact this election. Do you agree, disagree?
Look, the IFP is, or at least was, one of the most dominant political parties in our political landscape. Well into the political dispensation. From 1994 to 2004, the IFP was in coalition with the ANC. And Nkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi was the Minister of Home Affairs. In 1994, the IFP received 10% of the votes. They won control over KwaZulu-Natal provincial legislature. But I think that with the decline of the National Freedom Party in KZN in particular, there's definitely some opportunity for growth for the IFP. I wish them the best of luck. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Nkosi Buthelezi. I think he's definitely an icon of South African democracy, and he's a stalwart of our political structure. As for the question for whether there's going to be growth in KwaZulu-Natal, I don't know. There's a lot of movement at the moment with the African Transformation Movement, the ATM, Jimmy Manyi's party. I think that they have the opportunity for quite a large section of dissatisfied Zuma voters. I doubt that Zuma voters would go to the IFP, but I agree with you. I think the IFP is on the move, particularly KZN.
I'm seeing their sideline opinions in the chat says the IFP is going to make a huge comeback. Oh, we're going to have to wait and see. Goeienaand Shiver, nice to see you here, man. Then on that topic, seeing as you are pretty much involved with statistics and looking at polling data and anything, have there been any recent interesting developments in the polling scene or in the electoral race that you can share with us that you think is very significant come this election, 8 May?
Look, the only polling that really counts is on the 8th of May. Polling is not perfect. We saw that in 2016 when every single major political pundit predicted that Hillary Clinton, that Hillary Clinton would win the election, and they were wrong. You know, not all pollsters are right. Again, Brexit, everyone got it wrong. Definitely, I've seen some polling that I agree with. I've seen some polling that I definitely don't agree with. I saw one yesterday that claimed that the DA was dipping quite drastically in the Western Cape. Whether or not that happens, that's up to the voters on the 8th of May. But it'll be very interesting to see. You know, I don't want to speak too much about polls, my friend, because they're so completely unreliable. But there's definitely a shift, and I'm predicting a shift towards the opposition parties in this election. I think that the DA, ANC, and EFF will be taken aback at how strong other parties will be after this election. I definitely think that COPE is going to do much better than we did in 2014. We are on the mend, and it's going to be
all those wasted votes, eh?
All those wasted votes that are coming straight our way. Thank you very much to DA. And what I do think will be very, very interesting will be the breakdown of the provincial legislatures after this election, particularly the Northern Cape, the Free State, Eastern Cape, and most importantly, which I think will become a battleground province, is Gauteng. It's far too close to call. If you look at any of the polls, I have a feeling that we're going to be very surprised on election day in Gauteng province in particular.
Right, and if he is still listening, I saw a very interesting tweet from Roman Kamarak the other day that said that he is now officially going to vote COPE provincially. He was going to vote DA provincially, but he seems to have changed his mind. So that probably gives you some encouragement to hear. You probably saw that tweet.
Yes, I did.
I saw here, just going to find this here. So something else interesting that I saw that happened was, and I think someone just brought it up here. Yeah, the idea of, so Brad asks basically, where are your voters going to come from? And I think that's a very interesting question, that if you are expecting all this growth, are they going to be formerly disillusioned voters that just didn't show up and this time are going to come out and vote? Or are you going to get them from other parties where they're not being represented, or parties or disillusioned voters from the opposition? Where is this growth going to come from, do you expect?
Well, you know, we're talking to voters from across the board. We are talking to former DA, former EFF, former ANC, former IFP voters who are terribly unhappy with the way in which their parties are moving. We're talking to voters who haven't voted before. We're talking to young South Africans who are participating in the first election of their lifetime. We are talking to everyone. Nobody is off the table. No voter is going unheard. We are speaking to absolutely everybody. Where are voters going to come from? They're going to come from every single province across South Africa. They are going to come from towns and cities, from rural, from urban. They are going to come together on the 8th of May, and they're going to vote for the Congress of the People, because we are the only alternative. We are the only party putting the Constitution first, and we are the only party putting the people of South Africa first. And yes, we've seen a dramatic rise in our membership in the past few months, because people are realizing that our message of a united, better, and stronger South Africa for all is getting out there. So no, we don't have a homogeneous group, a homogeneous group of individuals that we're looking at drawing votes from. Our voters are coming from across the political spectrum and across the country itself.
But to stay on that point, do you think this growth, not where are you campaigning or who your target market is, but you just looking at the current situation and the current voting data, do you think that the majority of your growth is going to come from people becoming re-engaged in the electorate, like voters that didn't vote in the previous election now being inspired by your message? Or will they be disillusioned voters from other parties, no matter what parties those may be?
I think it's a mixture. And in every South African election, there are voters who voted for one party who moved to another. It's normal. It's a natural electoral and political cycle. Our voters, I was recently in Krugersdorp, my hometown of Krugies, and I was discussing with some voters, about 20 of them. And I'd say roughly a quarter of them had never voted before, and they were from different ages. They just refused to participate in elections. They said there was no one who was standing for them. And the remainder were from different political parties, and like I was saying earlier, who are normal crosses from one party to another, and really we're broadening our message, we're broadening our support base, and every single day we're engaging on social media, on the ground, you name it, and people are dissatisfied with the direction our country is heading in. And so we are taking in these voters and these potential voters who wish to see our country on a better path, and offering it a fresh start, because quite simply they're disillusioned with the status quo.
Now, also something that I want to transition into is the idea of, I see you talk a lot about it on social media. Now, not as COPE spokesperson, but more just you as the individual, someone that is keeping a very close eye on South African politics. Can you elaborate a bit more on the idea of political apathy and what it means and what its effect has been and probably will be on South African democracy?
It's a terrible shame that our country sees this apathy in our political participationary. Let me put it this way. It's very sad to see so many people apathetic towards the elections and towards elections as a whole. You and I are both young South Africans. We want to see what's best for our country. We want to obviously engage ourselves, and we're engaging on different levels and in different ways. We have got to ensure that as many South Africans as possible participate in this election on the 8th of May, because it offers our country the chance to have a dialogue, and it offers us a chance to participate in the way we want to see our country run, and the policies that we want to espouse, and the policies that we want to see in our country, in our national legislature. Apathy is a horrible thing, my friend, because when you become apathetic towards the system itself becomes apathetic towards you. If you are not going to participate in the decision making of our country and how we run things, then you're going to get left behind. I'm not one of those that says if you don't vote, you don't matter. Of course you matter. 100% you matter. You're still a South African. We still believe in the idea of unity. But it's imperative that you get up and you register to vote, and your vote will and can make a difference.
I think there's a beautiful, very old quote that goes, "You might not be interested in politics, but politics are definitely interested in you." And I think that is something that a lot of people need to start realizing in South Africa, is the idea of everything is political to an extent. Now, I'm not of that persuasion where I want to make everything political. I want to take a break from politics now and again, just enjoy something as it is without any political interference or whatever. But at the same time, I do think South Africans can benefit by just seeing the influence that politics has on their daily lives. In terms of, it's not inconsequential in terms of who steers the ship. A lot of people that I've met have this attitude of, oh man, it doesn't matter. Like whether it's the DA in charge or the COPE in charge or ANC in charge, nothing really matters.
Yeah.
Almost like a political nihilism. And I think that links back to your political apathy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and I think this is to get back to that question that I asked earlier in terms of new developments, in terms of polling data, people that are the demographic that are the most excited by politics, in terms of that are the easiest to get swept up in politics by a charismatic leader or by rhetoric, are the young people. Mm-hmm. And I saw a very interesting stat this morning. Actually, I was told it by my mate Paul, who was on the Politic podcast with me. He said new statistics or new polling data shows that the expected voter turnout in terms of the youth is far below what the EFF and ANC were expecting and hoping for. And especially for the EFF, that is devastating. In terms of COPE now, a lower youth turnout, would that affect you disproportionately, or are your voter base more middle-aged, older? Where does it lie in terms of the stats that you have?
Look, our stats, we're not really targeting, as I was saying earlier, any particular demographic. We're not necessarily targeting the old, the young, the middle class, the upper class, the lower class. We're targeting all South Africans who want to see our country on the right path. And in terms of what you were saying earlier, just to go back for a second, sure, you might not necessarily care who is in control of the ship, but you'll care a hell of a lot when the ship hits an iceberg. It's very, very important to know who's in control, who's the captain, and who's shoveling coal when the ship is sinking. As we saw under the previous presidency, how didactic in how horrible it can be when we're unsure of our leadership of that ship, that allegorical ship. But no, man, we're not really looking at any age group in particular. There's so many young people on our national and provincial lists, myself, Siyasanga, just to name two, both appear in the top 20 for COPE's national parliamentary list. And there are about 4 or 5 of us who are still in our 20s who are in electable positions for the Congress of the People. So we are saying that our candidates represent the broad demographic, economic, linguistic, racial, you name it. We're representing the wonderful colors of the rainbow nation on our national and provincial lists. But no, we're not targeting any group in particular. But the EFF, for example, as you so eloquently said, will be absolutely devastated if the youth vote is lower in terms of turnout, because a huge section of their voter base is young. So it'll be very interesting to see. But we're not concerned. We know that young, old, black, white, from Limpopo to Western Cape, we're going to get the vote.
But at the same time, now you bring up provinces, as each party, or at least the big parties, have a provincial stronghold. Do you have a high concentration of support in any particular province?
In 2009, we were the official opposition in the Northwest, in the Eastern Cape, and in the Northern Cape. And to this day, we retain quite a large section or sector of supporters, particularly in Nelson Mandela Bay, in Johannesburg, in Pretoria, in Kimberley, in Limpopo, and in our president's home province of the Free State. He was very warmly welcomed last week back home to the Free State. It was really nice to see that. No, we don't have a support base per se. Our support base comes from the broader South African community. But we are trying to broaden that and to get these pockets of voters who have traditionally voted for either the ANC or for the DA to come out and support a smaller political party selection.
Right, all those wasted votes, man. But John, while we're building this political profile for your party, I'd like to know: are you more of a rural or an urban party? Not in terms of, I know you're more of a mix, but in terms of, do you lean more rural or urban in terms of not only your policy platform but also your support that you're seeing on the ground?
Well, 40% of South Africa is deemed to be of rural background. The remainder is urban. I could be wrong on those statistics, but when I last checked, it was a 40-60 divide. Our policies espouse the ideas of serving both the rural and the urban communities. I think the urban communities and the rural communities, the issues that come from those sectors are two very different, kind of polar opposites issues that might arise. So you need to treat them with different remedies, if you will. But at the same time, we want to see the upliftment of the rural sectors of our country while maintaining the dignity of the individuals who live in the rural areas. And of course, also ensuring that our urban areas are maintained and that service delivery is compounded and essentially broadened out into the urban areas. Service delivery is still a massive issue in terms of our rural capacity. So no, I don't necessarily think you could give it a number, or you could really lean one way or another. I was in Pretoria recently, really, and I can't actually give you the name of the little dorpie I was in because it was so small. But there were people that were coming out and saying, look, we've always voted for Party A and we're not so happy, and we're seriously coming out in favor of COPE because you're supporting the people who live in these rural areas via your policies. And I agree 100%. We've got to ensure that both rural and urban communities receive the necessary support.
Right. I just want to thank the chat again. Guys, you're overwhelming me with the questions, man. You're doing my job for me. Thanks again, guys, for all the likes and views so far. We're peaking at around 40 live people watching, and thanks for everyone that's liked the video so far. It helps the channel out a lot. And now I'm going to use some of these excellent questions that you've given me in the chat so generously. One specific one, and this is a very hard one. We can start with this one. And I think it's a relevant question, but it's a question that all electorates ask, or all constituencies ask their representatives. Free de Boer asks, Jarrod, why should we trust COPE to execute their campaign promises on policy?
Well, Friede Boer, aangename kennis. First of all, how are we going to execute our policy? We are the only political party in South Africa with national government experience. Mr. Lekota was a Minister of Defense and Premier of the Free State. You can't say that for any other party other than the DA. But we have national experience. We have individuals in our party who have run national departments and provinces. We don't want your vote simply because we want your vote. We want your vote because we want to make your life better. We want to offer this country a fresh start. We've learned from our mistakes in the past. There are very few political parties that will come out and say, look, what we did in the last election didn't work so well. We're saying, we're here now. We're offering policies that benefit the country. So we want your vote. We want your vote because we believe in you as a South African. We believe in your participation in our democracy. And we believe in the people that we've got on our lists. We believe in our candidates. We believe that the policies in place will benefit you as an individual. And we simply can't do it without you. Your vote is not a waste. It's not a vote that's just going to simply be cast aside in the next election. You are part of a broader plan, and you are part of something bigger than me. You are part of something bigger than you, bigger than any political party. You're part of the South African, the destiny of our nation. And that is why we simply will not use and abuse you as voters. And you can listen to President Lekota when he speaks. He's very adamant about this.
Maybe to add to that, I think the idea of how we know that you execute your policies. Well, if you vote for COPE and you get COPE to a point where they can have some influence on policy and they don't deliver, you can, at the next election, you can go tell them to take a hike and you can take away all their support again.
Sure.
And how democracy works. So if they're lying to you and they pretty much betray your trust, then you have absolutely no reason to trust them in the next election. Then you can tell them, like I said, you can tell them to go to hell.
I think one thing we can all agree on is that we can't afford another 5 years of ANC rule. And
Right.
with only 3 members of parliament, COPE has been a pillar of support against the processes of expropriation without compensation. We've been one of the few parties that people have recognized. You've said, you've stood up for us in parliament against EWC. You've stood up for the constitution, and we'll continue to do that. But now imagine if we've got a broader list of candidates or a broader list of representation from the COPE side, what we can do then.
I see Alexander Hamilton asks, he says, he apologizes for spamming the question, and absolutely no worries, it's a good question. He asks, Jarrod, why specifically did you choose to work with a patriot and activist such as Lakota over the likes of Patricia de Lille and Bantu Holomisa?
Well, thank you for your question, Alexander. The thing is, and Alexander really epitomized my president for me so wonderfully there. He is a patriot. He served time on Robben Island. He has been fighting for this country for 6 decades. And when I heard him speak in Parliament for the first time about constitutionalism, about social democracy, about putting our country first, I truly felt for the first time in a very, very long time that there was a leader who stood up for what I believed in. And there was someone that I would want to see hold a position of power. I don't want Mr. Lekota to just be a member of parliament. I want Mr. Lekota to be my president, the president of the republic, the people's president. And I have respect for people like General Holomisa of the UDM and Mayor de Lille of Good, and I wish her and him the best of luck. It'll be interesting to see how Good does in this next election. But I prefer Lakota. I prefer the Congress of the People. And like I've been saying, Mr. Lekota has been standing up for me and for you and for South Africa for many, many years. Well, long before any of us were even dreamed of, or before we came into this world. And what an honor to be working with someone like Comrade Lekota. It really has been phenomenal for me. And I'm very thankful for him.
And it's really nice to see and to hear, rather, someone that speaks so admirably and so genuinely about their superiors, in terms of, this doesn't sound like just your corporate boss. This sounds like someone almost like your mentor, your idol, or your hero. Yeah, and I can speak from personal experience working at AfriForum has that exact same feel to it. The idea of I'm working amongst people like Ernst Roots and Kali Kriel and Monique Tauta and people that and Gary Nel, people that I've had immense respect and admiration for, and now they are serving as my co-workers and also my mentors to an extent. And I can't thank them enough for the immense influence that they have on my life.
Mm.
So on that note, the idea of I think this is the big question that I've seen people ask in chat as well. The idea of what is on top, what is at the very top of your agenda in terms of if you get into parliament with a significant amount of seats, what is your top priority? If you could single out one certain issue or approach or policy that you would really pursue very passionately and earnestly.
Well, two things. You did mention Roman, and then he said that he was going to change his vote from the DA to COPE provincially, and it's a fantastic idea. And it leads into my answer to that, because our candidate for Premier of Gauteng, Mr. Dennis Bloem, has been a anti-corruption and anti-apartheid activist, and he appeared before the state capture inquiry recently. So, Roman, thank you very much for lending your vote to Mr. Bloem and COPE. He's going to make a fantastic Premier of Gauteng. And leading into that, the first thing we're going to do as the Congress of the People is we're going to put people in jail. Those who are found guilty of state capture, those who are found guilty of endangering our economy, those found guilty of breaking the constitutional oath as political leaders will be put in jail after a fair process, after due process. You have to put individuals behind bars, those who are guilty of corruption, those who are guilty of state capture. They must pay for the heinous crimes they've committed against our country and her people. When we're done with that, one of the first things that we will definitely be doing as the Congress of the People is introducing the amendment to the Electoral Act, which will allow South Africans to elect their president, their premier, their mayor, their member of parliament, and their member of provincial legislature directly. It will also open up the doors for independent candidates to run in future elections. It's a humongous and a tremendous piece of legislation that we've drawn up as COPE that will really put the power back in the hands of the people. We are going to ensure that our economy comes first. Our economy is sick. It's on its deathbed. We need to revive it. And in the coming days, you'll see in our party political broadcast that will be going out. I don't want to say too much. I want to ruin the broadcast. What our plans are for the economy. We need to ensure that our safety, our security of the people of South Africa is paramount. We need to ensure that we are free and that we are given the freedom in terms of our security and our safety to walk around at night, to be unafraid of being robbed or raped or murdered in our own homes. We need to secure our very what's what I'm looking for. We need to ensure that our policing is put back on track. And most importantly, the Congress of the People will offer South Africa a fresh start. This is not just rhetoric, my friends. This is not just a politician standing in front of you saying, vote for my party because, it'll be a lack of time and we might get some free things. I'm saying to you, we are putting you first. We're offering South Africa a fresh start. Check out our details and our policies at www.saconstitution.co.za. That's the COPE main page. And I'm running for Parliament under the Congress of the People because I love my country. I love every single person who lives in this country, whether they agree or not with me politically. And I'm standing up for not only the youth, but for everyone who believes in a better, stronger, and greater South Africa.
Now I see in the chat, a funny man asks, and he actually asked a very relevant question, something that we haven't touched on quite yet in detail, but is very important.
Sure.
How does COPE envision stimulating the South African economy?
That's a very interesting question. And like I said, we've got some videos coming up. But a very funny man, you'll see. We think that there's far too much red tape that exists in our country, particularly with entrepreneurship. And I think perhaps to a degree we might agree with the Purple Cow Party that we need to open up our economy. Our economy is completely controlled by bylaws, by red tape, by yellow tape, by blue tape. It's constrictive. It denies the very basis of entrepreneurship. So we want to open up our economy by ensuring that we don't let the little guy, the little grocer on the side of the streets, close down because a new Pick n Pay is opened up and it's going to bring his business down. We don't want the people who are selling perhaps on the side of the road. We want to open up opportunity for them. We're offering opportunity and not government handouts. This is something different that we've had in the past. And at the same time, we also need to examine ways that will bring in foreign and direct investment. We've had some terrible, horrific policies in the past that have really catapulted our country into near economic disaster, where we've told foreign direct investment to essentially disappear. But at least now, sorry, my cat decided to take part in the debate. But now with COPE saying, look, we've got to open up the economy, we are quite literally saying we cannot close in our economy. A socialist economy is never a good one. So we need to open it up to the direct investors, to the direct investors in South Africa itself. So we have some fantastic policies in place that will really shift our economic landscape for the betterment.
Now, I think this is also a big question, but not in terms of what COPE's stances are,
Sure.
but rather your personal perspective in terms of what you expect to see this coming election. Now, what I want to hear from you is, firstly, how do you think give me some predictions in terms of how the top three parties will perform? And then when it comes to COPE, rather than telling me how you think you will perform, tell me what the minimal requirement for you would be to consider this election a success.
Okay, interesting. I think the ANC will definitely dip below 60% nationally. It's not even a question of if, it is definitely a question now of how much it dips. I think that it stands to lose some major metropolitan areas further. I think the grip on certain provinces is loosening. Ramaphoria is dead. There is no longer a Ramaphoria or a euphoric idea behind President Ramaphosa. So definitely a significant dip in support for the ANC. The DA will see a drop as well. How much, I'm unsure of at this point. I think that it will be far more dramatic than anyone is anticipating. Anywhere from 2 to 5%, maybe even dipping to 15% is definitely possible. I think they'll retain the Western Cape, or by probably quite a significant drop in their support base there too. I don't think the EFF will do as wonderfully as everyone is predicting. I think that the data that is being collected is oversampling the youth vote for the EFF. There might be a slight increase for them. You know, it's really difficult to say at this point. Like I was saying earlier, Gauteng is too close to call. I think we might see coalition government there. And for COPE, you know, the thing is, if we get one vote in this election, it's a success for us, because that means that people believe in us. If we get 1 million votes, even better. That means we've got a strong mandate to push our policies in the National Assembly. We are not in this election just for 1 or 2 or 3 votes. We're in this election for as many votes as possible. We want as many South African voters to come together, to stand behind us, to stand behind the idea of offering our country a fresh start. And like I said to you, we are going to be the party of government. We are going to see Mosiuoa Lekota as president of the Republic after May 8th.
No, very, very concise and interesting answer. Now, what I want to do now is, seeing as we're winding down now, can you now just gather your thoughts and give us a final going away message for everyone that's listened today? And before you go, I just want to say thank you very much for everyone that tuned in. I immensely appreciate that you took an hour out of your day to listen to our discussion today. It was very interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you for your excellent questions again. Like I said, you make my job easy. You're doing my thinking for me.
Great,
and thank you again for everyone that's liked so far. It helps the channel out a lot. And thank you especially for those who've shared the link. This interview will be up on my channel afterwards again, so you can catch it on catch up. So now I'm going to hand the mic over to you, Jarrod, and just give us your final thoughts, not in terms of just from COPE's perspective, but your personal perspective as well, in terms of what is the final message you want to leave the people listening today with, going into the future and going into the rest of 2019 with the election on the 8th of May.
Well, Jarrod, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. I really enjoyed it. I can't believe it's been an hour. It's been flipping fantastic to engage with you and chat, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the questions and engaging with the comment section. It's been great, and it really has been an enjoyable evening. Where do I start? I think we have to start way back in 1994, I suppose. when we were offered so much and when the opportunity for greatness presented itself to us. And in 1994, we were offered a country that would stand together. But instead, we ended up with a gangster state where people are putting parties above our country and above our people. There's so much we have to lose in this election, my friends, but there's so much that we have to gain. There is never going to be a time like this. There will never be an opportunity like this again. The fight for a stronger South Africa starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with us. The Congress of the People is the only party that's putting us first, as I've said. And together we are stronger. Together we are greater. And together we will make history on the 8th of May. And it's been an honor. This campaign has been one of the greatest honors of my life, to have run for a seat in Parliament, to represent the party that I love with all my heart, and to work with comrades from across the Cope family. It has been truly, truly wonderful, and I want to thank each and every one of my friends and family in Cope who have really stood up for our country. I can't tell you how phenomenal it's been to see people working together for a common cause. But it's easy to have a few sound bites, but I truly, truly do believe that South Africa is stronger together. And I think that as the Congress of the People, we can offer the people that. And you know, whether you're young or old or black or white, or from the hilltops of Mpumalanga all the way to the low veld of the Free State, change is coming. So let's be part of something bigger and greater than ourselves.
And no, very succinctly put, and I think you can feel very chuffed with your informative interview tonight. Jarrod, thank you very much for giving us the time of day. I know being very busy with your election in less than 2 weeks, I mean, you're probably running around like a madman.
It's crazy.
So thank you for taking the time to come talk to us for an hour. Very informative. I might not agree with all of your policy positions, but this interview show of mine is more to inform my audience rather than just to have a debate in terms of what I don't agree with. We can have that chat on another day, maybe.
Definitely.
That's why I always open my show with greetings from the dark continent. And as I always explain to people, it's a dark continent in an information sense, in terms of when you talk to people, not just foreigners, but also South Africans in South Africa, they are horribly uninformed in terms of what is going on around them, what's going on within their communities, and what's going on within their government.
100%.
So that I do think in an information sense, we are living in a dark continent, but that doesn't mean there can't be little candles and little light bulbs and even big spotlights out there that are shining a light on things that should matter, that people should be paying attention to, and things that people should be considering a bit more carefully and a bit more earnestly. So that's what I will try to do with this channel. I want to be a little candle on this dark continent, illuminating little things that I deem important that might help you make sense of this crazy world and crazy country that we live in. But to end that on, and I think that's the type of message I want to send out there, at least every day, try and do your little part in terms of not only inspiring other people to be better, but also helping spread good, informative information. Fight the good fight every day against the propaganda and radical ideologies that have taken root in our country, often ideologies and ideas that have been imported here that did not originate through grassroots or from our own South African minds. Help me and people like Jarrod in this fight against the propagandists and the statist apologists and just the jackboot lickers in general. And I think we can definitely make a difference. You are not too small to make a difference. And that's the idea I tried to convey with my article in the Rational Standard. The idea of that you can make a difference as an individual. And even me, I'm just a boer with a mic. That's what I always say. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you very much. I can't express how much I appreciate that you take an entire hour out of your day on a Tuesday night to listen to my interview and listen to the guests that I have on. You guys make this show what it is, and I am eternally grateful already for, even with only our small base of 2,300 subscribers. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And Jarrod, thank you for coming on, giving us the time of your day. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. I hope you have an excellent evening going forward, and I'll see you on the next one. And this is just an announcement from Conscious Carrigal telling you that opinions can't, in fact, hurt you or give you cancer. Have a good one, guys. Cheers.